Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an upload that is just full of terrifying experiences. I got some very interesting news to share with you. Before we get into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? All right, guys, first and foremost, I am going to be interviewing Brad tonight. So tomorrow's upload will be a all-new interview with Brad. For those of you who know Brad, he is the gentleman who was on another Dogman Encounter channel. He shared his experiences, came over here, shared them again, and has since shared his angelic or Nordic alien experience. He has a new one, and I shared that with you guys a couple of days ago. Looking forward to having him back on. We've talked a couple nights in a row, and he's pretty excited about sharing what he has had happened as of late with you. And he has actually learned a valuable lesson to not go out into the woods anymore at all. Gun, no gun, just no. And next bit of information. As all of you know, I love reading. I talk about skinwalkers in the Pentagon a lot, them and us, how Neanderthal predation created modern human. But a dear friend of mine, Jimmy Petnito, he worked with the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, at a young age. He was present for some of the Father Malachi Martin incidences that had gone on. He was actually in the movie Hostage of the Devil, and he was the cameraman for the Warrens. Just a really down-to-earth, super nice person. I'm gonna have him on here pretty soon. We got to get our time slots together because he goes to bed real early because he goes to work real early. So, but he wrote a new book, and he did write one book with a friend. He wrote a book with a friend. I had to run upstairs and grab it because I have this one upstairs, but his new one I have down here because I'm in the process of reading it. But Phantom Messages, he wrote with William Hall, Jimmy Petnito, and it's Phantom Messages is a tour de force of the extraordinary realm of paranormal communication experiences, carefully researched but written in a lively style. This book is entertaining and important contribution to the study of a much neglected phenomena. That is from Dr. Andrew Nichols, the director of the American Institute of Parapsychology. Pretty much what this is phone calls, letters, emails, and texts from the unknown realms. So if you want a very interesting book, grab this book, Phantom Messages, excuse me. But this is Jimmy's new book, and I am so proud of my friend because this is his book that he did by himself, and it's Mr. Haunted Origins, Jimmy Petnito. It's on Amazon. Please go get the book. It is really amazing. My exorcism videos and spiritual photography have been featured on Sightings, Unsolved Mysteries, the Travel Channel's Shock Doc, Devil's Road, and Netflix, Hostage to the Devil. Inside, I share my most memorable moments while investigating hauntings and 15 of my favorite guest stories while hosting the radio program The Haunted Chronicles. How did this nerdy little kid who hated going to church come to share screen credits with 2 popes and an exorcist? It's all here in Mr. Haunted's Origins. Please give my friend some support. Go over to Amazon, grab this book. Jimmy Petnito, Petnito. Or Onito, excuse me. Like I said, I'm going to have him on here very soon when we can get our times together. But he knew Father Malachi Martin firsthand. You know, he isn't like, you know, you hear these people that say, oh yeah, I knew this guy. When, you know, he met him at like the frickin' coffee shop. No, Jimmy knew Father Malachi Martin. Jimmy worked hand in hand with Ed and Lorraine Warren. Just an amazing individual. So, once again, Mr. Haunted Origins. All right, let's get into today's upload. I've got some just terrifying experiences to share with you. Also, we'll jump into some more reptilian documented case files. Let's get into it now. Today's first experience is a possible feral human experience. I live in Colorado and I like to spend my weekends in the mountains, fly fishing, hiking, camping, etc. I'm in my early 20s, so young I suppose, but I like to think I'm generally comfortable in the mountains, and I've seen quite a bit of what this state has to offer. My older brother is a lot like me, but even more experienced in the mountain wilderness. And a few days ago, he and I had gone fishing at our favorite hole, the Holy Cross Wilderness. This area is fairly well trafficked, especially now as the aspens are changing and lots of tourists are coming to see them. Bluebird skies, warmish weather, and he and I were just getting to the water when I first felt something was off. It was late morning at this point. Most people like to fish early in the morning, but this hole is blocked from the sun by a cliff face, and the fish don't usually start biting until closer to noon. Again, this is our favorite hole because despite the area having lots of hikers and day trippers, this part of the creek we are on takes some know-how and effort to hike to. So we're about halfway from where we had parked, and no one else was around. First thing I notice is very little wildlife ambience, background noise, after we set up our rods and get into the water. As I'm wading in, I hear rocks above us on the cliff move, and a couple fell into the water no more than 50 feet from us. That's odd. In my probably 15 to 20 times at this spot, I have never witnessed the cliff fall apart as it appeared to have done. Besides the sound of the creek we were standing in, it was deathly quiet, and the sound of the rocks falling and hitting the water made us both jump. My brother turns around and we both look at the cliff face. There's a ledge above the trees, and I had never given it much thought before, but I realized then and there I felt like someone not only could get up onto that ledge, but my gut tells me there is. My brother, I can tell, seemed to be contemplating the same thing as well. He literally turned to me a minute after the rock fell and said, "Okay, that was weird, right?" I told him, "Yeah," and then I hesitantly told him, "Hey, it's quiet out today." Almost on cue, a rock lands in the water, this time between us. I'm not kidding. We're near this cliff face, but not near enough for a rock just to fall off and land between us. No, this rock had been propelled. We looked up, and that's when we saw it. A person holding a rock in their hand, naked as all get out with long brown hair. And as we were looking at it, it looks like he was grinning and threw the rock at us from above. It got close to hitting my brother, and immediately we were yelling, "WTF!" and quickly wading back to the other side of the creek. My brother slipping, and this person must have thrown another rock at him because I heard a huge kerplunk and my brother yelling bloody murder. I got onto the bank and grabbed a rock in my hand and turned to throw it back at the person on the cliff, but they were no longer there. Keeping my eyes on that ledge, I offered my hand to my brother as he is now soaked, and I pull him to the bank. He is upset, to say the least, saying that he's going to get his gun from his car and shoot that guy, and saying that he could have been killed. Now we are both on the bank looking up and expecting more rocks to come flying, and sure enough, they do. But we cannot see who is throwing them. They are golf ball to football sized, being tossed down one at a time. From memory, I count a total of 7 thrown at us after the initial. My brother throws a rock over to the ledge, but I tell him that we should move. We weave through the river willows, looking back over the foliage to keep an eye on that ledge, and then we hear it. A blood-curdling howl, scream from that direction. I didn't see the creature or being or whatever you want to call it, but it had to have been what we saw to make that noise. We got back to the car and we were both starting to recollect what we had experienced. We both figured that it must have been some deranged homeless person or something, but it's not until I told my girlfriend when we got home that night, and she told us about feral humans that she had seen on TikTok. I guess homeless psychos are the same thing as these fearless humans, right? Or is there a distinct difference? Neither of us were hit by the rocks, although my brother says the one that I didn't see land was so close it splashed him, and that's why he fell in the water. I should note we drove to the National Park Ranger's office and filed a report under my brother's name. He was told he would give a call today or earlier this week with any follow-ups or questions that may need to be answered. The craziest about this experience while out in the mountains, we were both already saying we may never go back to that hole again. And I already told a couple of my buddies of mine that I know that spot has something up there. This is a very interesting experience I shared on last week's live stream. I wanted to share this one because as of late, in everything that I've been looking into with the deep underground military bases, the alien connections and such, I thought this one was just real interesting. In 1986, my dad and my aunt, his sister, owned a cattle ranch in northern Puerto Rico. One morning, after finding several head of cattle mutilated under strange circumstances, Dad decided to guard the ranch during the night armed with a rifle along with myself. I was 15 at the time, and 2 of his buddies. A few nights later, we noticed movement about 100 meters east of us. There were 5 short grayish creatures with large heads emerging from a ravine approaching the cattle. These creatures quickly entered one of the pens and proceeded to float a calf out. The floating calf was very close to the ground, and the beings walked alongside it in a shuffling manner. At that point, my dad and his friends began firing at these creatures. One of the beings seemed to be unhit and fell to the ground, shrieking loudly. The calf also fell to the ground, while the other creatures assisted their wounded companion, who was now writhing in obvious pain. The men fired again on these creatures, who then ran quickly into the woods, leaving the injured being behind. The wounded attempted to run away, but they were shot in the back by my dad's friend. It lies silently on the ground, dying. My dad then struck it in the head with the butt of the rifle, caving the top of its head in. It died very shortly thereafter. Pictures of this dead alien being were taken and hidden away. My dad preserved the body in a very large kind of barrel and filled with alcohol or formaldehyde. He had stored it in the cellar at our home and told me never to mention it to my mom or siblings. I remember seeing it several more times after the incident. In '99, my dad suddenly passed away. His friends think he was killed by the beings since he disappeared for several days before his burned body was found in a remote area. I do feel that my dad's death was related to these things we had witnessed on that strange night. The body of the creature is supposedly being kept at one of my dad's friends, who fears the local and U.S. authorities would somehow prosecute him for his involvement of killing it. I now live in Texas and honestly hope I never see that thing again, though I do believe it should be disclosed that they do exist. Today's third experience. I'm from northwestern Pennsylvania, Clarion County to be exact. This happened years ago. In the first experience, I was with my grandmother, who is 4'11" and full-blooded Sioux. She's always cranky, and she'll smack the smile off a grizzly. One night, we were sitting at the table eating dinner. Mind you, she enjoyed her whiskey. So as we are sitting at the table, we start hearing this weird grunting sound coming from the outside, like a mixture of a dog and a pig. Well, Graham didn't react to it, so I didn't mind it either. As we continued to eat, the noises started getting closer to the back door, which was only like 2 feet away from us. My grandmother stood up, grabbed the broom, and muttered something. Grandma never spoke in her native tongue around us kids. She always spoke in English. She threw the door open, and I saw a glimpse of it. There are no wolves in Pennsylvania. This thing looked huge, standing on its hind legs. It had a German shepherd-like head, while growling at my grandma. As she started swinging her broom at this creature, it screamed this god-awful scream that you could feel in your chest. My grandmother yelled more in her language. This thing takes off, and you can see the hair and muscles as it turns. That was the last time I saw it. My grandmother closed the door, looked at me, and smiled, and said, "We're safe now." I was in shock with tears running down my face, hyperventilating. I could still hear the screams of that creature years later. My second experience was sometime later when I was in my 20s. I've traveled all the states, camped, hiked places from northern Idaho, Montana to the Cascades. So one day I went for a trip at around an hour south of Leeper, Pennsylvania. I was out in my Yukon, big bird dogs. These 110-pound dogs are not afraid of a thing. They've chased grizzlies off, chased some cougars. They have no fear. That was until one day pheasant hunting. I had bagged 5 pheasant and a couple grouse. As the dogs worked, I was bagging my limit for the day, and they did something I'd never be able to see before. They cowered behind me, whimpering. I was in shock. These dogs would do anything to protect me. Yet here we are, deep in the Pennsylvania woods, no one around us for miles. These woods are dense and dark. I didn't see much, but I could see the ears, and they were canine-like. This thing was hiding behind a thicket of red brush. My heart was stopped. I had a 12 gauge with me, and I could slide 3.5-inch mags in, but I only had 3 rounds due to the stopper. We made it out of those woods. As soon as we made it back to the truck, I had never seen those dogs so scared in my life. They were shivering and hiding under my seat. They finally calmed down when we eventually got home. Today's next encounter. Late March 2016, a couple claimed to have seen a huge wolf-like creature while on a National Trust property, 1 in the morning at Cotswolds, Worcester. They took a blurry photo of the creature and drew a sketch, dubbing it the Werewolf of Worcester, because its features were similar to that of a werewolf. Robert Ingram and his wife, Nicola, sketched what they saw, though they believe that it was a big cat with unusual features which resembled that of a werewolf. From their drawing, it appears to be standing upright like a humanoid creature, rather than crouched like a cat. This creature supposedly had protruding, pointed teeth and sharp cheekbones. The pair encountered what they were convinced of what they saw while driving through Crom Court in the National Trust. The couple said the creature weighed about 9 stone and was as tall as their car window. They felt that the creature was going to pounce on their car before they sped off. Robert had produced the sketch so animal experts could find out what this creature was. He stated, "It was petrifying. It looked like it was on steroids. We were driving along outside the National Trust. There was lots of open field all the way around, when suddenly I spotted something in the road ahead. It was getting dark, but I saw its eyes reflecting in the headlights. We stopped the car, and it was just standing there. We had heard rumors of an escaped panther in the area, but we had thought it was a load of nonsense. When I saw this creature with my own eyes, I was stunned. It was enormous, far too big to be a fox or a dog. It must have weighed about 9 stone, about the same as a slim adult. It looked right at us and walked right up to the car. It then lowered the front of its body and looked like it was going to pounce. It just slammed the car in reverse and went as far as I could go. I was so scared I fumbled to get my phone and take a photo, but we had already driven quite far. There was no way we were going to get near this thing and take a picture. It was terrifying. The couple think the creature escaped from a zoo. There have been a dozen claims of a large escaped cat in Worcester in the past. A spokesman for Worcester's Wildlife Trust said, "It's always possible that there is a panther or another big cat in our countryside, but there hasn't been any in the film evidence to prove that they were there." Today's next encounter. A friend and I were hiking not far from downtown Salt Lake City in July of 2014. After a while, we decided to rest a bit. It was maybe 5:15, and since the trails were narrow and crowded with brush, we left the trail to rest under some very tall fir trees, where the brush was less thick, but it was still shady. July in Salt Lake is close to 100 degrees. As we were leaning on a stump, I noticed that we were standing among several trees that formed a teepee shape. As we were noticing and discussing it, I heard a loud crash and then a twig snap a few yards in front of me. My back was to the trail, so I was facing the hillside and deeper forest growth, while my friend was facing the trail with his back toward the hillside. The trees in the teepee formation were about to my right 10 feet, and where my friend was facing them and the trail, so my head was turned about 90 degrees when I heard the commotion coming from the base of the hillside. I immediately looked toward the sound and saw a humanoid covered in dark brown fur, moving quickly behind the brush. It wasn't more than 6 feet tall. I didn't get a great look at its face because it had turned and moved so quickly. I noticed that its fur or hair was two-toned, with darker on its head and shoulders, while lighter on its midriff. Its legs appeared to be darker as well. I shouted, "Did you see that?" to my friend while trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The last time I saw someone tromping through the brush in this area was the early spring. There were 2 cross-country skiers coming back down the mountain. The one in the front was wearing a blue jacket with the typical two-tone dark green pattern shoulder pattern. So, for some reason, it's the first explanation my brain came up with. I mean, could clearly recall the hairy creature, but at the same time, my brain was refusing to believe and was trying to come up with a better scenario. All it could muster was cross-country skiers on a hiking trail in the forest in July. At any rate, I then began to call out, "Hello, hey, hello," while also trying to listen for the direction of its retreat between my calls. My friend ran up to the spot to see if he could see anything. He had only seen a blur by the time he had got there, and turned all the way around to see what made that sound, and he wasn't sure what we were looking at. Even though it was only a few short yards to that spot where I saw the skier, there was nothing there. I regained my senses and began running. I found one track, but it resembled more of a kind of print that you'd find in deep sand, more of a dugout type depression in the needles. I measured it from side to side, and it was about an inch longer and wider than an 11 Chaco sandal I was wearing. I hadn't heard any crashing through the brush after the initial noise that grabbed my attention, so I was unable to determine what had happened to the skier/creature after it had passed behind the brush. There were small green plants covering the ground in the direction it had went by. They were only compressed and then quickly ran out to the edge of a very small and gentle ravine and back up the hill. We scanned for tracks. I didn't feel like pursuing deeper into the brush or up the ravine, so we went back to the trail. Oddly, neither of us felt threatened or in the least, and although the valley we were hiking up was very narrow, we just continued up the trail in the same direction our furry friend had gone. We thought we heard movement up the hillside a few times from various directions, but still never felt threatened. After an hour or so of high awareness hiking, we turned back so we wouldn't get caught up out there after sundown. After giving some thought, I found it highly suspicious that the creature had absconded so quickly through that brush without any noise except the initial crash. I wonder now if the noise was a deliberate attempt to get our attention, not as a trap, but rather an alert, kind of saying, "Hey, we're here, please respect our space." I am never going to hike up there alone again, that's for sure, but I'm definitely going back up there with a friend or two. I'd like to look for more indications of an individual or family group. If a group has moved in, I'd like to know. Otherwise, I might assume it was just an irate male passing through. Today's final encounter before we jump into those reptilian case files. I live in a very rural town in Mississippi where the majority of everything is forest or farm. My home happens to be very deep in the woodland area. It's almost like something out of a horror movie. The old creepy house in the middle of the woods. Yeah, that's my place. Back when I first moved here, everything was normal. It was quiet, peaceful house in the woods, the closest neighbors being 10 minutes or so down the road. Nothing out of the ordinary or weird until one night. I was driving home from work. It being nearly midnight or so, it was pitch black. I was tiredly driving, ready to finally get home and sleep. I let out a hearty yawn, closing my eyes for a split second. But that's all it took for me to almost hit something. Not even 10 feet in front of me sat this hairless, man-dog-looking creature. The thing, bloody and pale, hovering over a mutilated corpse of another animal. I hoped it was an animal, at least. This thing slowly looked up at me, staring me directly into my face with beady neon green eyes, the shine due to my headlights reflecting off of them, I hope. Its jaws looked almost unhinged, flaunting its many blood-covered teeth. I was frozen in fear. WTF was this thing? I honked my horn trying to scare it off, but it didn't budge. It simply sat there. After what felt like minutes of this staring contest, though it could only have been a couple of seconds, the thing scurried away, walking on all fours. I watched it disappear into the thick mass of trees that matched the rest of the forest. My eyes shifted back and forth from the forest to the carcass. I rubbed my hands over my face before continuing to drive. I still had a few minutes to my house, so I didn't worry about that thing appearing in my yard. I haven't seen it plainly in front of me since. That was 8 months ago, but I constantly feel as if I am being watched or followed. I've done my own research. Apparently these things are called crawlers. It's taken a liking to me and I'm scared. I am constantly seeing it from a distance out of the corner of my eye. Sometimes I see it for a second at a time before it disappears back into the woods. I know it watches while I sleep. I set up a camera waiting for the unfortunate night where I wake up and see it. That'll be the day when it finally strikes. All right, guys. So as all of you or many of you know, I have been talking and sharing these case files, these documented case files. The last one I did was a testimonial from a police officer, Herb Shermer, out of Nebraska. Then there was one with Linda Moulton Howe, and Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite in Reptilians. Go figure. These are all well documented and brought to the public's eye, but kind of overlooked, which is just really weird if you think about it. Case file 22 from Quest International, care of 15 Pritchard Court, Temple, New Sam Leeds, England. A major British UFO research organization consisting mainly of retired police, security, and military personnel, and its investigation of what may well be the most documented case of a crash retrieval of an unidentified flying object to date. On May 7th, 1989, NORAD installations allegedly tracked an unidentified object as it entered African airspace. The South African Air Force is also said to have tracked the craft by radar, traveling at a calculated speed of 5,746 or 5,746 nautical miles an hour. The incident was relayed by South African intelligence worker who, along with documentation of his military position, also sent documents and transcripts to two Quest International investigators, Tony Dodd and Henry Azadel, telling of the event. Also, several recorded telephone conversations with high-ranking military and government officials were obtained, which strongly suggests that something did in fact happen over South African terrain. Some of these recorded conversations involved military officials in South Africa who strongly reprimanded the intelligence reprimanded? Yeah. Why would they? Reprimanded the intelligence worker turned informer over the phone. This was due to the fact that the informer had left South Africa for Britain, where he stayed at a house of researchers and then later went into hiding. Quest International director Graham Birdsall has stated the documentation and individuals involved in the incident are of such a nature that the event must have taken place, or the international intelligence community is collectively perpetrating a hoax concerning a recovered disc. Birdsall strongly suspects that the incidents did take place due to the weight of the evidence. Following is part of a word-for-word transcript given to the researchers by the informant, describing what he alleged to be an actual top-secret report of the initial tracking of the object. Here is that transcribed information. The object entered South African airspace at 13:52 GMT. Radio contact was attempted with the object, but all communications proved futile. As a result, 2 armed Mirage fighters were scrambled. Short time later, the object suddenly changed its course at great speed, which would have been impossible for conventional aircraft to duplicate. At 13:59 GMT, squadron leader, the pilot of the fighter, reported that he had radar and visual confirmation of the object. The order was given to arm and fire the experimental aircraft-mounted Thor II laser cannon. This was done. Squadron leader reported that several blinding flashes emanated from the object, which started to wavering while heading northerly direction. At 14:02, this was reported that the object was decreasing altitude at a rate of 3,000 feet per minute. Then the speed, it deviated at an angle of 25 degrees and impacted in the desert terrain 80 miles north of South African borders. Botswana, identified as the Central Kalahari Desert, squadron leader was instructed to circle the area until a retrieval team arrived. The team of Air Force intelligence officers, together with medical and technical staff, were promptly taken to the area of impact for investigation and retrieval. The findings were as follows. 1. A crater 150 meters in diameter and 12 meters depth. 2. A silver-colored disc-shaped object 45 degrees embedded into the crater. Around the object, sand and rocks were fused together by an intense heat. 4. An intense magnetic and radioactive environment around the object resulted in electronic failure of the Air Force equipment, causing the crash of one of the Air Force helicopters. 5. The object was eventually moved to an Air Force base for further investigation. The terrain of the impact was filled with sand and rubble to disguise all evidence of the event ever taking place. The report indicated the hydraulic-type landing gear was fully deployed, suggesting an electronic malfunction that caused the object to crash. Probability due to the Thor II laser cannon having been fired at a craft. While the team observed the object at the Air Force Base, a loud sound was heard. It was then noted that the hatch of the lower side of the craft had opened slightly and appeared to be stuck. This opening was later forced with a hydraulic pressure equipment, at which point 2 humanoid entities in tight-fitting suits emerged and were promptly apprehended. The report was stated that the entities were of the following description: height 4.5 to 5 feet, complexion grayish blue, skin texture smooth, extremely resilient, hair devoid, body and head oversized in relation to human proportions, raised cranium with dark blue markings around its head. Face, prominent cheekbones. Eyes, large and slanted, upward toward the side of the face. No pupils seen. Nose, small, consisting of 2 nostrils. Mouth, small slit devoid of lips. Jaw, small in relation to human proportions. Body and arms, long and thin, reaching just above the knees. Hands consisting of 3-digit webbed claw-like nails. Torso, chest, and abdomen covered in scaly ribbed skin. Hips, small, narrow. Legs, short and thin. Genitals, no exterior sexual organs. Feet consisting of 3 toes, no nails or webbing. Note, due to aggressive nature of the humanoids, no samples of blood or tissue could be taken. One humanoid attacked a doctor, causing deep lacerations on his face and chest. When offered various foods, refused to eat. One-way passage has been requested for humanoids at Wright Air Force Base, United States, for more advance in the investigation and research. Many of the details regarding these humanoids are actually very similar to other branches of the reptilian race, as it has been described by other witnesses. It appears as if the serpent race is composed of several different branches or types, much of the same as dogs or other animals retain their distinction, but are composed of several different breeds. Commonly known reptiles are devoid of body hair, have prominent cheekbones, large slanted eyes, small openings in their place of ears, 3-digit webbed toes and feet, hands, except for the case of snakes, which lost their limbs through athermocation over thousands of years, have claws, are covered in scaly ribbed skin, and have no external reproductive organs, being egg layers, and are aggressive, predatory by nature. The top secret document indicated that the passage of the object and creatures would be implemented on June 23rd, 1989 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Actually, sources do indicate that Wright-Patterson did in fact go on red alert that day. Subsequent documents supplied by the intelligence source to QI indicate that the creatures seem to have a strong connection with the Saurian race, which existed in ancient times. The exact wording of one particular document, which is now in the hands of the Quest International, is as follows. All information found aboard alien spacecraft concerning the evolution of alien life forms indicates to the evolution similar to what we find on Earth prior to the extinction of dinosaurs. A high degree of adaptability. Sorry, guys. Further, psychological studies performed in South Africa and the United States points simple complex structure and behavior. It would seem as if these life forms cannot function independently without group intelligence and identity together with a central command. According and additional information found aboard retrieved craft, a separate race is designed superior to them. Conclusion. An in-depth study and analysis of the psychological makeup and behavior prediction is advised. Studies performed on the 2 alien life forms captured has proven that they cannot act independently from their own acquired intelligence without access to communication, orders, and instructions from hierarchy or central command. 3 different aspects of South African affair, in fact, coincide very closely with what other sources have revealed concerning these reptilian Sauran alien creatures. The Sauran Greys are a low are the lower echelon of the hidden reptilian hierarchy. The other, or superior race, is considered to be superior bipedal reptilian saurian species as well, although they are a different, taller branch of the serpent race. The serpent race, saurians, reptilians, operate on a collective conscience level as if the individual alien beings are, to put it in one perspective, individual cells in the immense hive-like mind or body of a single immense creature. Actually, there seems to be a combination of both individual as well as collective or group conscious. 3. Description of these aliens as well as the electromagnetic nature of their craft corresponds exactly with the descriptions given in hundreds of separate reports. The intelligence officer who contacted Quest International and provided them with the information claims he did so out of concern for the security of the human race as the world, and although he was pressured into sightings of the National Security Act, he believes that he would be guilty of treason against the human race if he did not disclose what he knew and what the governments are trying to hide. Final case file. I am actually whooped tonight, guys. I apologize. Case file 23. From Is Inner Earth Research Hazardous to Our Health? Article by Val Valerin in the Leading Edge Research Journal. Lou Terry, who has recently relocated to Utah, was the foremost local proponent of geomagnetic vortex/UFO connection theory. Lou was instrumental in the discovery of underground tunnel networks in Vegas, one of them being between the base of Boulder Dam and Jumbo Peak, where the two mines, whose owners view a 200 diameter disc in their frequent basis. At one point, Lou offered to set up an interview with these miners. Alas, Mr. Terry could not be found. A local Henderson resident, who shall remain nameless, has been into the inner earth research for years. This person has been hounded and chased due to intimate knowledge of the inner earth tunnels. There is obviously something here that people wish to protect, something to hide, something to, what it is, something to, They speak cautiously about the reptilian humanoids and the serpent race, which are two subjects which seem to be surfacing again. Response to local television and radio programs featuring John Lear have been overwhelming. A recent lecture in Vegas drew over 700 people, according to the same source. The grays are a lower level of the bigger scenario that involves this reptilian race. All right. Yeah. All right, guys, I am actually exhausted. I apologize. I've been overdoing it lately with the channel, with helping my mom and her life and the kids. My daughter is going to be done with school, so she's homeschooled, as many of you know. And, wow, it's just taking its toll on me. So I'm going to call it early tonight, crash out, and be 100% for that interview with Brad tomorrow. With that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that helps the channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives people a place to share their experiences, ideas, and theories, judgment-free, ridicule-free, simply treated with the respect we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.